Hi, my name is Indeed, and right now we are at the Chester Beatty Library located in Dublin, Ireland. Probably wondering, who is Chester Beatty and why does he have a library? Well, allow me to give you this horrifically brief introduction to him. Now, there's a lot I'm skipping on. I'll leave a link in the description to a video that goes into much more detail than me. It's fascinating. You guys basically Mr. Worldwide, check it out. But in short, he was basically a New Yorker who developed an avid passion for rock collecting, and he was able to use this passion to get into the Columbia University of Mines. From there, he developed a talent at using his knowledge of minerals to find gold, and because of that, he was able to work for John Hayes Hammond at the age of 27. From there, he basically became a philanthropist. He basically became a very rich guy, and he started traveling the world, going through Europe, Asia, and Africa, collecting all these different artifacts, arts, texts, whatever he can think of. He funded many institutions in Britain, including donating his own house to the Red Cross as a hospital that would be used both in the First World War and the Second World War. For his services to Britain, he was knighted. Afterwards, he moved to Dublin, and he started donating his many findings to many different museums and institutions here. For instance, he donated some of his guns to the Weapons Museum at the Curragh in County Kildare, and he donated some very beautiful paintings to the National Art Museum in Dublin. But most importantly, he opened up his library over here, where he kept what was probably his biggest collection. In fact, it's said that only 1% of his collection is ever shown. The rest is basically cared to and stuff behind closed doors. Eventually, he was awarded the first honorary citizenship of Ireland, and eventually in 1968, when he died, he was given a very good state funeral. And you know that when you get a state funeral, you're a very important person. But today, we're going to look at some of his cuneiform finds, including specifically one involving a certain shulgi. When we were at the Chester Beatty Library, we passed by a bunch of things. Islamic texts, beautiful Chinese art, a full set of Japanese samurai armor, even some old Christian apocrypha written on papyri from Egypt, I believe, including, a very spooky sounding Apocalypse of Elijah. And, of course, Sephardi Sefer Torah, dating back to the 18th century CE, of course. But, of course, we were only going to see the star of the show, CT-113. This is the tablet which I mentioned in the introduction earlier. So what is CT-113? Well, it's a cuneiform text. It's housed in the Chester Beatty Library, and it's dated between 2100 to 2000 BCE, so about a 100-year margin of error. And it was probably made in Girsu, which is modern-day Tello in Iraq. On it is recorded a delivery of 6 gur of barley. It was delivered by someone known as Banzi from a certain Lunin Shubur to probably what can probably be assumed to be the royal residence of the House of Shulgi. Now 6 gur might not sound much. I mean, 6 something you can count down on your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. However, if you look up the right stuff and do the math right, 6 gur can go up and can be calculated to as roughly 400 pounds. So effectively, the House of Shulgi is receiving about 400 pounds of barley, which is a lot of barley. You can make quite a bit of Guinness out of that. So, I mentioned earlier that there was a certain Shulgi mentioned. I should probably clarify, the Shulgi mentioned, it's not actually talking about the person Shulgi, the king Shulgi, who reigned earlier than this text was made. Rather, the text actually references his son, Amar Sin. So, who are these people? Well, Shulgi, King Shulgi, was the second king of the third Ur dynasty. His father, Ur-Nammu, was the first king, the founder of the third Ur dynasty, which basically came about after the Gutian rulers basically became weak after ruling their different parts of what used to be the Akkadian Empire. Basically, it's often known as the Neo-Sumerian Empire. Now, there is a bit of a misconception that there was supposedly a Neo-Sumerian Renaissance. However, that probably isn't the case because there was never a real decline in Sumerian or Sumerian culture. But anyway, that's a little bit off topic. Shulgi himself was the second king of the third Ur dynasty. His biggest accomplishment was building the Great Ziggurat of Ur. If you ever look up any ziggurats, you're most likely going to come across the Ziggurat of Ur. In fact, I believe during one of the invasions of Iraq, U.S. troops actually came across this big ziggurat. Some people saying, it was the birthplace of Abraham, Avraham Avinu, something like that. But yeah, if you ever look up any ziggurats, Shulgi's Ziggurat of Ur is probably going to be one of the first images you'll come across. He's also known for initiating his dynasty's apotheosis. Or in other words, he basically started calling himself a god and started getting everyone to treat him like a god. We know this because, generally speaking, on cuneiform texts, whenever you have names written out, proper nouns, whenever it's a name, it'll be preceded by one of two things. It's either going to be seen by a dish symbol, which signifies a male name, or a sag symbol, which signifies a female name. Even kings would do this. Except Shulgi. What Shulgi started doing was, instead of using either of the two, he used the Dingir symbol, which would signify a god. And so he basically, if you look on any inscriptions mentioning him, or like any of his bullahs or seals, you'll notice that instead of Dish Shulgi, it's going to be Dingir Shulgi, which is effectively saying Shulgi the god. Now, of course, those symbols weren't actually spoken; they were sort of silent. They were honorifics to signify, what kind of status the person was. But it was, in effect, saying that Shulgi is a god. And after Shulgi, basically, his descendants copied him until the end of the dynasty. So his son Amar Sin, however, is the one that is mentioned. Who is Amar Sin, and how do we know that he's the one talked about on CT-113? Well, who was Amar Sin? He was the son of Shulgi, the third king, and like Shulgi, he's also seen using the Dingir symbol rather than the dish symbol, generally used for males. He was the third king, as I said before, and he was mostly known for just, generally expanding the empire. Conquered some territories in the Zagros Mountains, campaigned against Elam, and most notably, he was campaigning in Assyria. He put down a rebellion in Ashur, the city of Ashur, and he conquered Erbilum, which which is now ancient Erbil. In fact, Erbil and the name Erbil in Iraq, the city in Iraq, Erbil, that name literally comes from the name Erbilim. Anyway, we know this was Ammar's sin because on the tablet, it literally says, and the year that's recorded is literally the year after he destroyed Erbilim. Now, it doesn't explicitly mention him, but we know that, it was directed to the house of Shulgi. This tablet talks about the house of Shulgi, and Erbilim was destroyed, and so the only person who would have destroyed Erbilim would have been Ammar's sin, who was from the house of Shulgi, and that's how we know that this text was made during the reign of Ammar's sin of the 3rd Ur dynasty.